My question to the panel is, we have all heard Mr Scott Morrison has decided not to be a bulldozer-style Prime Minister if he is re-elected. I believe in the old saying, a leopard can't change its spots. And after watching the interview with Lee Sales and Mr Scott Morrison, I am convinced he can never change. Shouldn't we judge him on his past deeds rather than promises to change in the future?
Now, Cathy McGowan, that was Brenda McGowan. I do need to point out you come from a big McGowan clan. You're one of 13 yes. Kids, but Brenda's not part of your
Hello,
clan.
Brenda.
Anyway,
great question. I'm fascinated to hear. So
let's start with you on that because Brenda's asking about this concession from Scott Morrison that he's been a bit of a bulldozer. What did you make of that? And whether do you think he can change?
I would love to see it. And I say this really genuinely. There's a huge amount of room for improvement in our government, and I just want what's best for Australia. I really do. And if Scott Morrison can get to this stage of the election and honestly say he hasn't been as good as he could have been, and he could have been better, I really welcome that, and I think the people of Australia would welcome it too. And then they will make their decision at the polling booth whether they think they'll make a choice about that. But I really welcome that comment from him because I think there's been a lot of times, and certainly for some of the women that I know who think he could have been kinder and gentler, and I would have liked to have seen that. So I thank him for his acknowledgement. I wish him well, because one of the hardest things is to change yourself. That's a really big task. But he's clearly said that he'll set about it, so I wish him well, and the people of Australia will make a choice.
Well, Senator, let me ask you, because we're talking about your leader, the Prime Minister. Does he need to change?
The last 3 years have been very tough for Australia and Australians. So we've had floods, we've had fires, we've had a pandemic. We now have the largest ground war in Europe since World War II. And it's required some pretty tough and some pretty decisive leadership. And I don't think you'd want to see, as we move out of that phase, as we move into a post-COVID era, as we focus on the economic recovery, the same kind of strong, assertive leadership that you saw in crisis in normal times. Hopefully these are now peaceful and prosperous and conflict-free times, and it will require a different style of leadership. And I think that's what the Prime Minister was signalling.
Right, he knows, so he wasn't talking about changing himself? No,
I think he was talking about changing himself.
That's what I want to get to. How's he going to change?
Well, he ran a very tough and very small government in the middle of a crisis where decisions had to be made really quickly, where you couldn't go through the normal sort of consultation and careful consideration. You had to make decisions on the fly because we were confronted at the beginning of the pandemic with a warning from Treasury that unemployment could hit 15%. We were confronted with warnings from the Health Department that tens of thousands of Australians could die. And so quick decisions had to be made to shut our international borders, to put in place economic supports like JobKeeper. And that doesn't lend itself to kinder, gentler politics. It's very quick and sometimes very tough politics.
Just to pick up your language there, we'll see a kinder, gentler Scott Morrison?
Well, I think it'll be a more consultative Scott Morrison. I think it'll be a Scott Morrison that takes the time to bring people with him because I hope he'll have the luxury of that in more peaceful times where urgent decision-making isn't required.
So kinder, gentler and more consultative?
Yeah, I think so.
Peter Hartcher, what did you make of why Scott Morrison felt the need to talk about being a bulldozer and the need to change and this description that we're going to see a kinder, gentler, more consultative Prime Minister?
Well, to me, David, it looked like a deathbed conversion. Where suddenly looking at electoral oblivion, he decided that he would, he'd have to change. That's how I interpreted it. And it's also, to me, just a clear signal that he felt the election campaign slipping away from him.
He's not the first leader in trouble to promise, that they will change. The description of himself as a bulldozer, of course, was interesting here, and it was followed yesterday by these images, which I'm sure everybody has seen by now, of the PM bowling over an 8-year-old on a soccer field, sort of reinforcing the bulldozer image there, I suppose. But the kid's fine. The kid's A-OK. Peter, to the question that Brenda asks, should we believe a Prime Minister at this point, in this political position, when they say they are going to change?
No, I don't think you can. I think you judge someone on their record. And I think, James has said kindler and gentler would be a better mode. But the thing is that a leader has to respond to whatever circumstances present. In a major crisis, we could have done with more of bulldozer Morrison. With the bushfires and the floods, the country was crying out for Scott Morrison, for the Prime Minister to take leadership in those crises, and he didn't. Bulldozer Morrison, has a place in those circumstances. Kindler and gentler, when there were crises with a rape being committed in the ministerial wing of Parliament House, when there were other atrocities going on, he could have shown more empathy. When there was a march of women for justice in Parliament House that he refused to meet, he said that they could send some representatives perhaps, but he wouldn't meet the crowd. Those were moments for empathy, for being caring and considerate. So a national leader has to be able to find within him or herself the qualities to meet the moment. There's no one mode.
Gigi?
I tend to agree. It's politically expedient to say this, of course. And this is what we see every election in Australia, right? What gets votes is someone who seems to be somewhat, self-deprecating and also appeals to the pocketbook of the voter. And I'm sure we'll be talking about those policy proposals right now, and they're pointing to things that are about the pocketbook. And they're trying to distract away from the real issue, which is that for the last 2 years, we've had mismanagement from both big parties.
Can I ask you, Josh Burns, part of the reason Scott Morrison's unpopularity is an issue in this campaign is that Labor has very effectively gone after him over things like, going to Hawaii and the bushfires, going missing, some of the comments, don't hold a hose and so on, portraying him as a liar from the Shire and all of that. How important has this negative attack on Scott Morrison been to the Labor campaign?
Well, there's a couple of things I'd say. First of all, it hasn't been the Labor Party that's effectively made character assessments on Scott Morrison.
You've had a bit to do with it, to be fair.
Members of the Liberal Party. You've got Gladys Berejiklian, you've got Malcolm Turnbull, even the President of France, Emmanuel Macron, said famously, "I don't think I know that he's a liar." So I think that there's been a long line of people wanting to make an assessment on Scott Morrison's character. Going back to Brenda's question, though, I'd say this. Like, he's not changing. This is as good as he's going to get. And what this Prime Minister has been for the past 3 years is what he will be, plus more for the next 3 years if he's given another chance to govern our country. This guy has been a handbrake on climate action, a handbrake on a range of different things, a handbrake on Integrity Commission. He's not changing, and we either are going to wake up on Sunday with another 3 years of Scott Morrison, or we're going to wake up with something better.
Before we move on, a little earlier in the discussion there was a reference to a rape being committed in Parliament. I would just like to clarify they are allegations. That matter is before the courts.